Welcome to the 2020 edition of On Deck. Welcome back. This is exam 85, section 2, logical reasoning. We're going to attempt to get through questions 1 through 5. Question number 1. Ullmann's argument is most vulnerable to the criticism on the grounds that it fails to consider the possibility. So we have Ullmann is going to present us with an argument that is flawed. Okay, so I'm reading it. The conclusion's got to disconnect from the reasoning. And here's what Ullmann informs me. Plato argued that because of the harmful ways in which music can manipulate the emotions, societies need to put restrictions on the music their citizens hear. Thank you, Plato. So Plato wants to restrict the type of music we can hear in that music can manipulate the emotions. That's a fact. In this argument, that serves as a fact. Next sentence. However, because musicians seek not to manipulate, no, not musicians, they don't seek, no, because musicians seek not to manipulate the emotions, but to create beauty. This argument is misguided. No, it's misguided is Mr. Ullmann's conclusion. All right? So that's the conclusion. Ullmann says, listen, that music can manipulate the emotions is subordinate to the fact that musicians, they don't seek to accomplish that. So their intent is not necessarily to manipulate the emotions, or is not to manipulate the emotions. Their intent is to create beauty. But that doesn't address the fact that you were given in the first sentence. The fact you were given in the first sentence is music can manipulate the emotions. So the intent of the musician is not relevant to the outcome, right? That you may not intend it. That never happened in your life, or is it just me? Something comes about, you say, how did that happen? I didn't intend for that to happen. So that's the flaw. Now that work's got to be done before you look at the answer choices, right? Because you're just looking now to recognize that the writer has performed this same process, which is IRAC, and you're just going to get the answer. You're going to know it when you see it. Okay, A, what musicians intend their music to do and what it actually does are different. Bada bing, bada boom. That's pretty much what we said. So yeah, that is the flaw, that what musicians intend their music to do and what it actually does can be different. So that is for sure it's a level 1 or a level 2. I doubt it's even a level 2. You got to pick it. It's a psychometric test. You got to get your ass out of there. I got it. Now we'll read the others, but you should not be reading the others on the test, because A is the answer. B is the flaw that those with the power to censor music would not censor other forms of expression. I don't have a clue. That is a million miles outside the contours of this argument. C is the flaw that there are other more convincing arguments for allowing the censorship of music. Well, there may be more convincing arguments, but that's not the flaw in this argument. This argument is, here's what music can do, here's what the intent of musicians are. That's it. So whether there's some more effective way or not is not relevant. D, other forms of art have more potential to be harmful to society than music has. Who cares? This is simply an argument about the musician and the music. E, artists who are trying to manipulate people's emotions to control them are not likely to admit it. That, again, is not the point. So, no, whether that's true or not has nothing to do with this argument. This argument, you are told as a fact, music can manipulate emotions. You are then told as a fact that musicians seek not to manipulate the emotions. Okay, well, then E is not a valid outcome. So again, A is the answer. It should be clear that A is the answer, and this is all about IRAC. Question number 2. Which one of the following principles, if valid, most helps to justify the physician's conclusion regarding the tax? This is a principle issue. So I'm going to read about a physician's view on a tax, and I want to walk that up the ladder to a general principle that justifies the physician's position on taxes. Got it. I got it. Okay, here goes. Physician. A tax on saturated fat, which was intended to reduce consumption of unhealthy foods, has been repealed after having been in effect for only 7 months. So we're given a fact here, right, that there's a tax on saturated fats to reduce the consumption of unhealthy foods, and it was repealed after only 7 months. The word only seems to matter to me. Okay, next sentence. The tax was apparently having some undesirable and unintended consequences, encouraging people to travel to neighboring countries to purchase certain foods, for example. Second sentence is in, right? The second sentence is you put this tax on, and now people are going from New York, which is Connecticut, is just about half a mile that way from where we're standing, and I'm going to go to Connecticut and get my saturated fat. So we repeal this after only 7 months because Peter is going half a mile away to Connecticut to get his saturated fat. Nonetheless, final sentence, the tax should not have been repealed so soon. And that's the argument's conclusion. You shouldn't have done it. So I want to walk that back up the ladder. So the tax should not have been repealed. So what is the principle? How about the principle has something to do with healthy foods, right, with your health, and something with allowing a law enough time to play out. So I'm seeing the principle here as if you're dealing with if what you're trying to do is address health needs of people through a tax, then that tax should be given greater than 7 months before you repeal it. That's where I am. That's it. Now I'm just looking for the writer to have that same thought, but use the writer's words, not my words. Okay. A. So is this principle to help justify it? A tax on unhealthy foods should be implemented only if it can be known with a high degree of certainty that it will actually improve people's health. Well, it does hit on unhealthy foods, but nowhere in here is it that the only time you can do this is if you know with a high degree of certainty it will improve people's health. I don't know what degree of certainty that the physician is gravitating towards. It might be something less than a high degree of certainty. It might just be a degree of certainty. So no. And A doesn't deal at all with the time factor, which I think is really important here. B, it is not possible to adequately gauge the impact of a tax intended to affect people's health until the tax has been in effect for at least 1 year. Yeah, I like that. We'll keep reading, right? But yeah, I like that because if you look at B, right, if the principle is, does this principle justify the physician's decision? And this principle is, it is not possible to adequately gauge the impact of a tax intended to affect people's health, which this is, until the tax has been in effect for at least 1 year. So if that were the principle, it would justify the physician's conclusion. So we'll keep reading, but B is going to be the answer, I'm quite sure. C, before any law intended to improve people's health is implemented, all foreseeable negative consequences should be carefully considered. And again, this is more of a recommendation. This is not, again, it makes no mention of the time factor. I mean, sure, I mean, you can agree with this as a general statement. But again, there's nothing in here about foreseeable consequences. But again, it's missing the time factor. It's missing the temporal element of you didn't give the tax a long enough period of time to survive. So it's critical that you form this in your mind's eye before you ever look at answer choices, or you're going to be off to the races. In a bad way. D, a law intended to improve people's health should be repealed if it is clear that most people are evading the law. Well, no. First of all, we don't know that it's most people here, but no, but that's not, in fact, that's contrary to the physician's position. He's saying you didn't give it enough time. And E, a tax on unhealthy food should be applied only to those foods that are widely believed to be the most unhealthy. It's not about the degree of its unhealthiness, right? It shouldn't give the tax long enough. So a lot of question number 2 really came down. A lot of weight went on the word only. That you gave it only 7 months. Like, why do you say only? Why didn't you just say 7 months? Why did you say only 7 months? And it suggests the state of mind of the physician, which is you didn't give it enough time. Okay. Question number 3. Which one of the following most accurately describes a flaw in the reasoning of the legislature's argument? So, flaw. Got it. Okay. Disconnect between the conclusion and the evidence. The legislator. A foreign company is attempting to buy Ferrometal, a domestic iron mining company. Okay, that's a fact. You're telling me that's a fact. That's what's happening. Foreign company wants to buy ferro. We should prohibit the sale. That's the argument's conclusion. Because now you're saying that is a statement that now must be proven. You're saying we should prohibit it. Now you have to tell me why, which is the reasoning. So here's the reasoning. Now remember, this is flawed, so the reasoning cannot be valid. If we allow a foreign company to buy ferro, we will have no grounds to stop foreign companies from buying other iron mining companies in this period. So I stop. So you're saying you cat's out, which is the legal term actually. You're saying the cat's out. You let this company do it, and you create a precedent, right? And the precedent would allow, but would not require, but it might allow other foreign companies to buy the iron mining companies. Got it. Some foreigners will control most of the soon foreigners will control most of the iron mining here, leaving our manufacturers at their mercy. Well, that's speculative. How do you come to that? You're like making a prediction, right? And you're saying, well, if you do that, soon they're going to own. Well, that hasn't happened yet, and there's no reason to believe that's going to happen. So this is speculative. Let me continue here. So you say soon foreigners will control most of the iron mining here, leaving our manufacturers at their mercy, period. The end result will be that our manufacturers will our manufacturers will no longer be able to rely on a domestic supply of iron ore. That could be true. I mean, I embrace this could be true, but you're saying we should prohibit the sale, and then you're giving me speculation. You're saying, when you say we should prohibit the sale, you could have said we should think carefully about the sale, but you're saying we should prohibit on the basis of speculation of what might happen. So I don't have the exact words, but I surely understand what the flaw is. You would only know that the sale should have been prohibited after these events, which have not taken place, took place. And they may not. Okay. So now I'm looking, which one of these mimics what my mind produced? Does A do that? So is the flaw here that the argument draws a conclusion that simply restates a premise presented in support of that conclusion? No. No, the conclusion is we should prohibit the sale. So it's not restating a premise. The premise is above that, and then the reasoning is beneath that, but no. B, is the flaw that the argument takes for granted, which means assumes that the argument assumes that what is true of one particular industry is true of the industry in general. The argument doesn't make any such assumption, right? The argument is saying there's going to be this chain reaction of stuff. So it's not about an assumption that what's true of one particular industry particular industry is true of industry in general. This is all about the iron mining. It's not about industry in general. C, the argument defends a practice solely on the grounds that the practice is widely accepted. I have no clue whether this practice is widely accepted, and none of this is mimicking what my mind came up with. D, the argument presents a chain of possible consequences of a given event, as if it were the only possible chain of consequences of that event. Sign me up, good night, lights out, I'm gone, use the answer. That is what we discussed, and there it is. The writer is writing what our mind produced before we ever read what the writer wrote. But we'll go here. E, the argument concludes that one event would cause a second event, even though the second event would have to precede the first. I have no clue. And if you're drilling down on E, If you've read D and you don't understand D's answer, and now you're trying to figure out what the hell the writer just wrote in E, you're a loser. Don't do it. All right. So no, it's not about one event would cause a second event, even though the second event would precede the first event. No. No. All right. Question number 4. What's the issue here? The engineer's reasoning most closely conforms to which one of the following principles? Another principle issue. So you stop. So the engineer is going to give me specific reasoning, and I'm going to walk that up my ladder to a general statement. Okay. And the two are in conformity. The examples in conformity with the principle. Here is the food company engineer. I stand by my decision to order the dumping of small amounts of chemicals into the local river, even though there is some evidence that this material may pose health risks or health problems. Okay, so that's the position he takes. He's going to say, I know these chemicals, well, I don't know, but there is a possibility that these chemicals, which I'm releasing small amounts of, right, these chemicals may pose a health risk. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm stand by my decision to release them. And here goes. I fish in the river myself and will continue to do so. So he's accepting the consequences of his own actions. Okay, I got that. Furthermore, I will have no problem if other food manufacturers do what our company does. So you may be sitting there saying, I disagree with this guy, but nobody cares what you think, right? So here's what I've got. I've got the food company person saying, I stand by my decision. The decision is to release small amounts of chemical into a local river with a concession that may pose health problems. He gets that. Then he says, you know what, I fish there myself, which is to say I accept the consequences of my own action. And in addition to that, he's saying, I have no problems with if other manufacturers do what I do. So the principle, you're walking it up from fishing. It's not about fishing, I don't think, right? It's about what the engineer is ascribing to is a principle that says, if I accept the consequences of my own actions, which involves something unhealthy, and further, I accept that others may engage in the action, which may actually be an unhealthy action, but if I'm okay with that, and I bear the consequences gladly, and I bear the consequences if my neighbor does the same thing, then you can walk it up to a more general statement that an action, that may have adverse consequences is justified when you accept the consequences and when you accept that your neighbor may engage in the same behavior. That's the answer I'm looking for. Okay, let's see which one kind of looks like that. A, it says, so is this the principle that one is justified in performing an act if other people are also planning to perform that kind of act? That doesn't address the health thing. It doesn't address the, you yourself being able to withstand the consequences. So no. B, one should always choose to act in a way that will benefit the greatest number of people. I have no clue. Again, respectfully, if you chose B, maybe, knock your head against the wall, don't hurt yourself, but that's like, really? C, is the principle that one is justified in performing an act if one is willing to submit oneself to the consequences of that action performed by oneself or others. Yes, that's the answer. Again, I would be gone at this point because that my mind had produced this had to do with, will I accept the consequences of my own behavior? And taking another step, will I accept the consequences of other people engaging in this behavior, which is not the best of behavior? Okay, so C's the answer. Well, look at D. D says, so the principle in D is here that one should never perform an act until one has fully analyzed all the ways in which that act could impact others. And again, that's not related to what we're talking about here. This is, will you suffer? Once you lose the train of your own thought, you're dead, right? So you got to stick with what my thought came up with, right? Is I just have to accept the consequences of my own actions and others. And D does not say that. One has the right to perform an act as long as that act does not harm any anyone else. So that's just stupid, because this actually, we don't know whether they're harmed or not. This may harm people. So the answer there to question number 4 is C for Caligula. And we'll close out here question number 5. Which one of the following is an assumption required by the political strategist argument? So, assumption. So, okay, that's what we have here. Here's what the political strategist tells me. It informs me that clearly attacking an opposing candidate on philosophical grounds is generally more effective than attacking the details of the opponent's policy proposals. Period. You stop. That's the conclusion. What I'm being told here is I want to attack a candidate on philosophical grounds rather than on policy grounds. So now you should be asking why. Why do I want to do that? And when you get to the why, it's probably going to be the answer. Say why? Why should I attack on philosophical rather than policy grounds? Next sentence. A philosophical attack links an opponent's policy proposals to an overarching ideological scheme. So now I'm in ideological scheme, okay, thereby telling a story and providing context. So I'm now telling a story. So the reason I'm moving philosophically, right, is because it tells a story and provides context, and that's not explicitly stated. So that statement is assumed. Okay, what's next? This makes, you see, the fact that it is telling a story and providing context, right? That's the this in the next sentence. This makes the attack emotionally compelling. So now I'm doing it because it's emotionally compelling. So just follow it, link by link. So the assumption here is that an attack on philosophical grounds is emotionally compelling. That, I suspect, will be the answer. So here we have a woodpecker somewhere nearby. We don't know where Woody is. So that's what I'm looking for. It's linking emotionally compelling with the philosophical ground. Okay, so A, is it assumed the stories that people are most likely to remember are those that are emotionally compelling? Well, it's not about what you remember. It's about what is effective. B, political attacks that are emotionally compelling are generally more effective than those that are not. I'm sign me up. I'm gone. That is an assumption underlying this argument. And again, you need to practice this IRAC stuff, because if you're forming, the issue is applied to the rule, which here's the argument. The analysis, the whole point of the analysis is to come out with something other than an empty brain. All right, you say, yeah, oh, okay, I got this. Okay. C is the assumption that political attacks that tell a story are able to provide more context than those that do not. No, this is about making something emotionally compelling, and that is the reason upon which you go to, that's why you're doing it on philosophical grounds. D, voters are typically uninterested in the details of candidates' policy proposals. What does that got to do with anything? No. And E, most candidates' policy proposals are grounded in an overarching ideological scheme. I have no clue whether most of these arguments are grounded in an overarching ideological scheme, and whether they are there or not doesn't inform me as to why it should be a philosophical rebuttal and not a policy rebuttal. So the answer to question number 5 is B for Brutus.